So, yeah, it feels like I'm back in the saddle here now.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy my seat while I was gone?
I did very much. Did you have a good break?
No, it's shit.
Yeah. I
took a week off when I was sick.
Did you? You were definitely sick.
Oh, I was definitely 100%.
Yeah. Just because I saw Boys Life their tour began, I think, last week. So
I missed it.
It wasn't, you weren't.
Where are they playing? Like,
I'm not exactly sure, but I just thought.
Well, you're following them quite.
No, you weren't following as a groupie around.
No. Only because I was sick.
Yes.
Only because I was sick. I would have been there with my t-shirt and yeah.
Yeah. No, again, we had it was a busy week,
Yeah.
While you were away. So it definitely.
I wasn't even away.
Well, out of commission.
I was out of commission. I was homesick. It was very, very annoying.
Yeah.
But I had been to London.
Yeah.
The weekend before I got sick, and that was quite interesting. We've stuff coming up about that. Did a little tour of the Ripper, the Ripper's territory in Whitechapel. Have you been there?
I haven't. No, yeah. I mean, I have actually heard of that tour. Like, it is meant to be really
great.
good.
It was really good. Yeah, we did it at night time, and there was a lot of other stuff we were doing over at that CrimeCon conference thing. So that was it. I obviously did too much. Yeah. But I've loads of stories to tell you, but I won't be telling you them here now. I've loads to tell you, actually. So much to tell you. But I'm back.
You're back.
And you're just much happier now.
I'm much happier, It's great. You were sick. No, I knew, because we did speak on the phone. At one point you were telling me about your illness, and I obviously zoned out like I do sometimes, and you said, "Oh, you don't care, do you?" Yeah. Which is a rare moment of.
You don't get sympathy from anyone.
No,
if you ask me.
And in fairness to you rarely look for sympathy. But obviously at that moment I let you down.
I was made a few cups of Lemsip and stuff though at home, which was good.
Yeah,
it was recognised. My loss to the household was recognised for the few days.
For briefly, anyway.
One thing.
Yeah.
I have to say, I saw up on the SundayWorld.com website.
Yeah.
A video of Jerry Hutch out half pissed in Lanzarote or wherever he was, having a bit of a... And I actually saw it and thought, the guy is like a full-blown celebrity now. He can do nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then you ran it on the website.
Yeah.
Because people are...
Well,
interested.
I mean, look, you're speaking as somebody who's just gone to a Jack the Ripper tour in London.
True.
So, like, we have to... Yeah, look, this is the reality. And, we also had another...
I was feeling a bit sorry for him, because I just thought, surely he can go out and let his hair down without being videoed by some punter and then going viral. It must be really annoying.
Yeah, I mean...
It must be really, really annoying.
Well, look, I mean, this is the reality, isn't it? That certainly criminals in this country, but I've just actually we've been looking into a story about criminals in Liverpool.
Yeah.
So the line between celebrity and criminals...
It's just blurring, isn't it?
It's blurring. It's definitely blurring. Now, that's not to say Jerry Hutch is seeking to go the route of some of the criminal figures.
No, he's not exactly an influencer or anything like that. I mean, he's just kind of minding his own business. This is why I was kind of
he is up there singing on stage.
Singing karaoke or some nonsense, like he's half cut.
Yeah.
Don't we all need a blowout at some point? But
do you not think he'd be thanking the Sunday World for showing his singing skills?
I wouldn't have thought. I mean, just imagine being captured yourself in that kind of a situation. Your shorts on, and has he a hat on his head or something?
Yeah, but you see, look, I mean, he's been accused of worse than being a bad singer, is he? Or
no, he
possibly.
Has. He has. And I'm sure he can have a laugh at it himself. But
but it does show you, and even the CrimeCon, like, there is a line that's increasingly blurred. And we see Netflix in particular, I think they have that thing, Monsters, is it, about the two brothers who killed? But you see, so crime's role in the media continues to change and evolve, and we can't, you're making an honest living out of crime, as you say yourself. Yeah. So,
and you yourself.
And me myself, yeah. At
least we do it like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of celebrities,
or people who didn't
particularly go out to gain that sort of moniker.
Maybe,
But I mean, and another person I have some empathy and sympathy for is this guy we're going to talk about, Martin Wanden, who walked free from Portlaoise Prison this week for the first time in almost 17 years.
Yeah.
He has been banged up down there, playing chess and following his beloved football team, Chelsea, whenever they play their games. You can tell me whether they've been doing good or bad.
They have actually been.
Have they? Maybe that's kept his spirits up. But so Martin Wanden is in his 60s now. He's an English guy, and he was one of the men on the famous Lucky Day boat, which went sort of a shipment of cocaine went horribly awry for a group of drug smugglers in 2007 in the July down in Dunlough Bay. And people may remember the images of a guy floating around amidst the cocaine, the bales of cocaine, which had all sort of tumbled into the sea when he had a problem on the rib boat he was driving. And this cocaine was 1.5 tons. We discussed before, we reckon it was, a couple of 100 million worth of street value of this cocaine.
I mean, the value actually...
The value was never really properly estimated, but
between
it was
150 million and 400 million. It didn't seem to settle on any particular figure.
No. But anyway, and he was literally plucked to safety and... caught literally with he was floating, clutching to a bale of cocaine. But anyway, so we're going to talk about Martin Wanden and we're going to talk about that cocaine plot. Wanden was one of them that featured in our recent Cocaine Cowboys tour because the story is so fascinating. Yeah. It's the stuff of movies. And
well, literally, of course, as well. Because, it did become the inspiration, I suppose, for or at least an offshoot of it for the young offenders, which, continue. The young offenders certainly did better out of the cocaine shipment than Martin Wanden ultimately.
For sure. But this story itself could literally be a Hollywood movie. So let's begin. Let's start in 2006 at a meeting in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel, because this was what I was told was the modus operandi for this very unusual group of drug dealers. And they came together once a year at the Marriott that was closest to the stadium where Chelsea played their first away game of the Premier League season. And the men would gather at the hotel. We've no idea whether this plot had succeeded before, but we do know that this was an annual pilgrimage for them to go to this particular grouping. So they meet there, and the day before the match, it was a Friday, and they set about planning an epic journey for this 1.5 tons of South American cocaine, and the plan to get it across the Atlantic and to land it on the west coast of Ireland.
I mean, they aren't the typical drug traffickers. Obviously, one of the men, Mike Daly, was a former police officer, which instantly is different than the others. And nor do the other guys seem to have had this kind of street reputation of the guys we regularly talk about here. So presumably they were solely in the business of bringing in that shipment, not in the business of distributing it and collecting money. They really were smugglers, weren't they?
Well, I suppose we'd never really got to the bottom of that, because while there was a possibility that this had been successful before, it was like as if, by the time they all got to court and were jailed and went away, it was like nobody really wanted to bloody well know had they done this before, because it was a matter of luck for the authorities here that they were caught. I suppose you could say none of them were spring chickens.
No.
And all of them were in their mid to late 40s. So Mike Daly, as you said, had been an officer. In actual fact, he made it to the rank of detective sergeant in the Met Police and was on the drug squad. Yeah. So perhaps he did gain a certain amount of knowledge about the whole scene and, what value it would be to smuggle drugs from that. Now, he had left the police. There was some sort of a...
It was a minor. Was it minor disciplinary matter, was it?
Yeah, he certainly didn't retire and didn't have a glittering career. He got that far and he left and he became a taxi driver. And there was some incident that he was caught drink driving or something. So he had a little bit of stuff. But Mike Daly was, along with his childhood pal, who's known as Big Alan Wells. Yeah. They were the two organisers. They were the key men in this plot. And they were the two men that were in charge when they gathered in the Marriott Hotel. So Mike's brother, Joe Daly, was a builder.
Yeah.
I think he had a bit of a problem, coming up to 2006 into 2007, the construction industry was hitting a wobble.
Yeah.
And he needed to make money. And Martin Wanden, who was also a childhood friend of those brothers, he was living in Cape Town at the time with a partner and had a young child, seemed to have a number of properties over there, expensive lifestyle.
And he had also previously, he had come, unlike the others, he had come to the attention of the authorities. He had a previous conviction, was involved in drug smuggling, I think in France.
In France, yeah.
And he had, I think, been convicted, but sort of got out of the country and hadn't actually served any time in jail, and in theory was wanted in connection with that, and had washed up in South Africa. He definitely didn't seem to be short of money at the time of when it all came out and it all came to court. The Sunday World went to South Africa and had pictures of his properties now, given, the property was a lot cheaper and all of that. He still seemed to be must have had access to a lot of money. So,
and I'm not sure it was in Hout Bay, really upmarket part of Cape Town. I don't think that was ever cheap.
No.
That was always one of those kind of world exclusive property market. He was a seaman.
Yeah.
And he had an expertise in steering rib boats. That was his skill and what he was bringing to this enterprise. So basically, the plan was that, there was a number of people at this meeting never identified, including a money man who had put up some investment and probably others who were part of the logistical team. But by the time it was finished, they'd worked out that basically they were going to buy the drugs.
Yeah.
They had already made some contacts in Colombia. They were going to move the drugs into Venezuela. They were going to buy a yacht and pick up the drugs, bring them from Venezuela, I think, to the Bahamas. And they were going to cross the Atlantic Ocean, headed for West Cork, where it was a place that the Daly brothers, Michael and Joe Daly, had a history of, I think they had holidayed there in the summers of their childhood. They probably had, a grandparent or something that lived in the area, and they were keen seamen themselves. They were into fishing, so they knew all those coves and
it's a big exposed. I mean, I think when after the shipment, and I think you spoke about this on the tour, when it was caught, there was calls in the Dáil, wasn't there, to say we have to monitor our coast a little better, and somebody was calling for extra pairs of binoculars to be bought to have guys. So, I mean,
and they were looking for locals to police the coastline, because it's pretty unpoliceable. Actually, any of this stuff without a bit of bad luck or without intelligence. So the intelligence is obviously monitored by MAOC, the Maritime Big Long title, but it's basically sort of the European policing sea force that picks up intelligence and tries to track and then raid these container ships while the mother load is still on them. And that's what they do. But by and large, apart from that and a couple of touts and this bit of bad luck, which was put down to a number of things, but apart from that, there's cocaine travelling the world all the time and probably still landing on the shorelines in Ireland, particularly during the summer months when the weather ain't so bad.
Well, 100% certainly back then. I mean, like, obviously there's parts of the world that are monitored by radar technology and all of this. I'm sure parts of the US coast are, but like West Cork just simply isn't. So it was, obviously it's the first stop really, isn't it, in Europe?
You'd either hit the coast if you're going to land it on a coast, not a port. You'd go Ireland or Spain.
And Ireland, that part of Ireland obviously is particularly rugged. So, I mean, I don't think they were planning obviously to use these rib boats to get the yacht relatively close to shore, put the cocaine in rib boats and land it in a sort of uninhabited cove, really.
Where they had jeeps waiting. So they bought this catamaran called the Lucky Day in Florida in March of 2007. Paid $110,000 for it. I think Mike Daly bought that. And it was sent to an island called Margarita, which is off the coast of Venezuela, and stayed there for a couple of weeks, perhaps. The cocaine was loaded onto it there. At the time, there was a sort of a traditional route from Colombia into Venezuela and then on board the boats to come towards Europe. The boat, the Lucky Day, made its way down to Barbados and then headed across the Atlantic. Now, on board that was a guy called Gerard Hagan, who was significantly younger than the rest, who'd been recruited while in Spain. He was working in some car cleaning thing. What do you call that? Valet place in Spain. Now, no doubt he had connections with the Dailies or somebody. He was only 23 years of age. You don't go down to Spain, find a valet and ask him, will he ship your 1.5 tons of cocaine across the Atlantic without having some connection with them. But he was on board that boat with 2 Lithuanian crew members. And in the meantime, from between March and the July, Joe Daly and Martin Wanden turned up in West Cork, where they rented these sort of summer properties posing as English tourists. They brought in the rib boats and they brought in these jeeps, which looked for all the world like they were just rich tourists. And the rib was to have a bit of fun over the summer. They definitely didn't raise any eyebrows, either of them. But in the outhouse of one of these properties, as they waited for the Lucky Day to kind of arrive into Irish waters, they removed the seats from the rib. They removed the seats from the back of the jeeps so as they could pack it with the cocaine. And I think it was early in July that eventually the Lucky Day had made its way over and there had been an arranged meeting place. I think it was about 30 nautical miles out at sea at some sort of a sea navigational point. The Lucky Day was going to pull in there. The rib boat, steered by Martin Wanden, was going out. They were going to transfer the cocaine, 62, 64, 65 bales. No one ever settled on how many. And he was to bring them back into shore. I'll let you take over now, because I do think that you've done similar in cars in the past.
Well, I mean, I think everybody has done it once, have they?
Well, I thank touch wood haven't as of yet.
Well, most people who, if you've ever had a petrol car and then you try diesel and you go to the petrol station, you're distracted, you're worried about something in the future, you're thinking, in their case, presumably, where are we going to put it in the car? I hope it all fits in the car. So while distracted, instead of putting diesel in the engine, you put in petrol, is that?
Or vice versa.
In
this case, the rib boats actually took petrol. And Martin Wanden had filled up 2 big, huge containers of diesel. Because the Lucky Day had come so far across the Atlantic, she needed an extra little bit of fuel to get her to her next destination, which was towards Spain, the continent, whatever. So he filled these up and he brought them out. And the weather was really bad.
As it can be. And I think if you do that, you get a bit of traction for a while before the engine clogs up usually. So they seem to have got quite close.
But they actually amazingly managed to transfer all the bales, even in this really bad weather. And that would have been the dangerous part of this plot because of the gale force winds that had blown up. But they did manage to transfer all the bales. He managed to keep the rib boat beside the Lucky Day, the catamaran. And in the kind of, I suppose, the noise of the wind, the dark, everything else, it was this young lad, Gerard Hagan, who had misheard and he had poured the diesel into the petrol engines of the rib instead of just transferring them onto the Lucky Day. So he was the you were the gobshite. I think he was almost referred to in court as on that term, or certainly idiot.
So they did get away then from the Lucky Day, didn't they? They parted company and they got, I mean, I don't know how far.
They got within half a mile of the coast.
They got within half a mile.
Like, talk about how far is that journey across
I mean, I suppose.
Thousands of.
Exactly. And half a mile is really not that much. If it was a swimming pool, half a mile possibly is doable, isn't it? But it wasn't. It was at night. And
bad conditions.
Really windy, high waves, and they ran out of petrol.
The engines, I think, started to splutter on the way in. I'm sure he was hoping he could just get them into shore. But when the engines went, because of the weight and without it moving on the sea, the boat started to sink. And I'm sure he literally couldn't believe, Martin Wanden, certainly, what was happening. Now, Hagan, the young guy, who fucked it all up. He swam to shore.
Yeah.
And he climbed a cliff and he called into this sort of homeowner and said...
Yeah, I think he was well, I don't know, we used to describe him as a farmer.
Yeah, probably.
Because I think he did a couple of interviews, I think anonymously.
Yeah.
And said this guy called in and all. But I think even then they thought it was a slightly suspect, you know?
Well, yeah, I think he was told some story. Oh, you know, we've been out, my friend is out there. Yeah. The boat is turned over and there's a couple of things floating around. But don't worry about that. We don't want to call the police. We just want help getting them into land. And I suppose at least he was concerned about poor Wanden.
Yes. So the emergency services were ultimately called. And I don't know, you remember this better, but did he try and dump the cocaine then at some point, or did they just...
No, he couldn't dump it because it had formed almost a flotilla around him, the cocaine.
So it wasn't deliberately thrown in?
No. I mean, he's floating around in a big, those big suits that people wear to keep them dry. And of course, they're very awkward to be floating in the sea in. And the cocaine is around him and he's hanging on to the cocaine to keep him afloat. Yeah. So there's no pushing or shoving it or anything. He's just screwed. Right?
Which is kind of like Jaws, isn't it? Do you remember the end of Jaws where they're holding on to the things? So, yeah.
And of course, Joe Daly, the builder who'd fallen on hard times, and Perry Worry, who was this other friend of theirs who had actually kind of escaped the end of a prison term in the UK, was ultimately on the run, but nobody would have known him. And he had been living in West Cork as well with them. They had arrived on this pier, this agreed landing point for the Rib. They had their jeeps ready in place.
And they could see it happening, I think,
in live time. And then, of course, all the locals start coming down to the pier in their cars. You can just imagine the scenes. I mean...
And they did an exit stage right or whatever.
Well, on foot, because... all their jeeps were blocked in.
Yeah.
The guards and everyone came down to the pier and they looked around and they thought, holy God, this has gone wrong. Yeah. And they took off through the fields. I think they were eventually arrested.
Yeah,
hiding.
and like they obviously then received these huge sentences. I mean, I think it was 30 years, was it? One of them
Martin Wanden got 30 years.
Yeah, and that was that reduced?
On appeal to about 22. Yeah.
So they were, if you could say they were unlucky, they obviously deserve what they got in that sense. Yeah. But it was a shocking incident, if you know what I mean. We get, it's almost routine now for a few £1 million worth of cocaine to be seized in Irish life,
I wonder what was so incredible about it. Okay, was the bad luck, right? When everybody will sort of sit back and go, serve them right or whatever. But it was the idea that it was filmed, because it was filmed before things were being filmed regularly, right? Yeah. And it was because of the public way that it kind of... played out.
But it was also like the kind of the era of John Gilligan, and there was a kind of we'd already not too much further before that we'd increased the mandatory sentences for drug dealing on the back of the murder of Veronica Guerin and the targeting of the Gilligan gang. There was a kind of very much a focus on drugs, and then there was a genuine shock that this was kind of happening on our doorstep, and that's why it became an issue.
Yeah,
in the Dáil.
And the value of it was just so huge. And of course, I think the TV cameras were actually at the pier by the time Wanden was winched in and he was filmed. And of course, then some of them had gone on the run. Big Al and Mike Daly were missing. Yeah. They allegedly took the ferry back to England and went on the run, tried to raise some funds. There was some suggestion that they had tried to stage a sort of an escape for the lads while they were going to court. They certainly looked into hiring some military to break them out. But it was almost as if, and remember, this is 2007, this is peak cocaine use of the Celtic Tiger. There was panic around the amount of cocaine that was being used in Ireland, and this huge big shipment found floating in the sea. So they were almost like, was the likes of Martin Wanden an example?
Well, I mean, the courts would say, a judge would say they only ever treat the case as it comes before the court, and that they don't take into consideration the conditions, the societal conditions. However, the fact is that drugs, certainly with the Gilligan gang, which was really, a lot of it was the cannabis dealing, and we'd been through a kind of a moral panic about heroin before. And this was, they came to court at the wrong time. Let's put it that way. There was a sort of a growing awareness of cocaine use in the country. It had started to become something that was spoken about constantly after not being an issue at all, even 5 or 6 years earlier, even though it might have been an issue, but it wasn't an issue in the public arena. So I don't know, of course they were convicted on the merits of the case, but certainly the culture around it, it wasn't great timing.
And you see, I suppose they didn't have... These were people who were out to make profits. They hadn't addiction issues. They didn't come from kind of like, they weren't coerced into any of this.
Nobody was saying, we're going to break your legs if you don't do this.
And of course they pleaded not guilty and went to trial, which didn't help their cause when they were found guilty in the end. Because that, the fact that they hadn't shown remorse or pleaded. So nonetheless, Martin Wanden went off to jail with Joe Daly and Perry Warry. And they were 3 English guys into the Irish prison system. Now, they seem to have got on okay.
Yeah, they did.
Wanden certainly seems to have been quite a popular prisoner.
Yeah. I mean, they were guys far more mature than the average prisoner, I suppose, in age terms by the time they were convicted. They seem to have got on. They obviously, when you go into prison, and they were put in Portlaoise is still Ireland's only high security prison, as it's called. Certainly at that point, it would have held a lot of the most notorious gangland criminals, a lot of the Gilligan gang, people like Brian Rattigan, kind of the major league criminals alongside the subversives, the dissident groups. So they probably, by the nature of they didn't rat, they didn't do anything, they maybe have had a degree of respect. And they seem to have done their time. And I suppose people say in prisons like that, if you, act respectfully and keep your head down, you probably won't be bothered, where they think I have heard people say, Mountjoy is much more, even though more serious criminals are in Portlaoise, Mountjoy is much, just much more erratic and volatile people that are much more likely to be out of their heads on drugs, and it's more chaotic. But they seem to do their time. I mean,
the others have already so far been released, but Wanden, of course, would be one of the more high profile. So I think he's about 62 or 63 now, so he's a pensioner.
He's a pensioner. His wife passed,
His wife passed away just not long after, his partner anyway, died very tragically not long after he was actually arrested.
Yeah.
So I think nearly before he went to trial, she had died.
Yeah, he may have been on remand. I think certainly before he was convicted, she passed away.
Yeah, and a young woman. And he had a child who I understand has become a young adult and is, still in contact with her father.
Yeah.
And perhaps... that's somewhere that he can go or find a fulcrum at this point, because the houses, of course, in South Africa are gone as well. He's an English guy. Will he go back to the UK? Likely. It's the only support network that he will still have.
Yeah, though, I mean, some of the others did get transferred, did some of their jail time in the UK, I believe, in order to be close to their family.
Your boy did.
Yeah.
Hagen.
Yeah, he got him far lesser sentence.
He got 10 years, but he was transferred to Kirkwood Prison or something to serve out his time.
And he pled, because he was the one guy who did plead guilty. And it just shows you, if you're ever caught with bales of cocaine, plead guilty.
If you're caught red-handed, I'd say, it is a better idea to plead guilty. You would wonder the logic of them not pleading guilty, because I know in the case of Martin Wanden, when the rib was recovered, there was fingerprints all over it. He was literally clinging to the bales of cocaine. Whatever about the others who had done a runner, they did set out this narrative that they were just tourists, that they were visiting the area, and they stuck to that. And it was a little bit illogical, given, that he was found with the cocaine.
I think if you're a kind of a guy who gets involved in international drug smuggling on a major scale, maybe you are the type who fancies a roll of the dice. And I suppose they rolled the dice and thought, might get totally off. I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out. I mean, we used to get letters from them. I can't remember which one of them it was, sometimes alleging conspiracies. And I don't know if you remember that, did you?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah. And there was all this, and there was also a sort of a suggestion that they didn't know what was on the boat, even if they were on the boat or in contact with people on the boat. But look, it was a high price, but I suppose
they did appeal, I think, a number of times through the courts.
They did.
And they didn't get anywhere with their appeals other than the sentences were slightly reduced.
Slightly reduced. And I suppose they're a type of drug trafficker, are they? Where there's all different types, I suppose, but there's always these kind of sort of loose connections of people who you wouldn't put in that business who give it a go. And certainly in Colombia, I was looking at a YouTube with another guy, Posh Pete was his name, and
Posh Pete.
Yeah, he got involved, and he was a very middle-class guy, got involved in drug trafficking. But you can see how it would work. You just have to have a contact over there in Colombia, and they will deliver the cocaine to you at some point. Maybe these guys got it delivered to Central America, or maybe they took charge of it from Colombia. Like, there isn't really a problem. So if you want to give it a go and you have enough professional experience, you can try it. And who knows how many people do it and get away with it. There could be thousands of people.
I'd say.
There could be thousands of people in Ireland who nobody has ever spotted them in a pub with Fat Freddie Thompson, or, seen them getting in a fight with Brian Rattigan. People that are professional business people and never get caught. Now, I don't know if there's loads, but there will be some, and they will pass away and be buried, and nobody will ever publicly collect them.
Of, your chips coming in on black when you've put it all on red is just so much. I mean, 17, let's say, for argument's sake, 20 years of his life gone. He went into prison as a young man in his early 40s with a young child. He's coming out with the child an adult, and he's now, going to be claiming the pension, presumably.
I know.
But it's all that time wasted, lost behind bars and locked up, and your liberty taken.
But people take these chances all the time, and it's not just in criminality. You see, I was reading the case of the mayor of New York who was charged with criminal offences over the weekend. I was just thinking, why would you do it?
Why?
But people, it must be some sort of disconnect from reality, and just the belief,
just the thrill of it. Is it the thrill of?
And also, I think it's a sort of a narcissistic superiority that you just think you're just that bit smarter than the people who are trying to catch you.
You're always asking, what do they do after? They're not going to go and work for Tesco or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did notice that Jonathan Harding, aka Rocket Man, has found a new career in haulage, slightly uncomfortably close to certain occupations that could be handy. So Harding is a former Kinahan cartel gun runner, and we photographed him this week picking up containers from Dublin docks. I mean, explain this to me, that it's not as worrying.
Well, I suppose you have to use the skills you've developed in your life.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, you can't really complain if a criminal comes out of prison and engages in legitimate activity, which we do believe he's engaged in legitimate activity.
So he's 52 years of age.
Yeah. He was kind of he was obviously convicted in connection with the seizure of Kinahan weapons in the Greenogue estate, very famous, literally an arsenal of weapons. But that was just one of Jonathan Harding's sort of criminal enterprises. He'd also served a lengthy sentence for possession of heroin, and he'd also been previously arrested but not charged in connection with the seizure of a rocket launcher and other guns and drugs. Very much a sort of right-hand man for Liam Byrne. I don't know if right-hand man even would be the right term, but somebody who worked with Liam Byrne and basically did what he was told. So from the age of 20 to 50, involved in criminality.
And he's 52 now. He got out of prison just before Christmas.
Yeah.
And he's got himself a nice truck.
Yeah. Well, he always knows a bit about.
It's a really nice truck.
Yeah, it's probably not his own truck, in fairness.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know. He doesn't park it too close to his house anyway. You noticed that as well.
No.
That was a bit of a the world is watching type of a traditional yarn.
It was. I mean, look, it's great. It's, fair, more power to him. But it is, of course, it's funny. But maybe gamekeeper turned poacher.
Yeah, exactly. And look, Martin Wanden, if you're out there listening, I would really love to hear your side of this story and what happened and what your plans are for the future. So we'll leave it at that.
Be well, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.